Welcome into the Illini cast. Austin Berkland alongside Sonny Verma, and it's been a while, but we are happy to be back. And Sonny, how has your night been going?
Night's been interesting. As some of you that are paying attention, we were supposed to go on about 40 minutes ago. And then, right as I was about to hit that live button, my phone started blasting off, and we heard the tornado sirens outside. So, the missus and my two little kids came downstairs to the basement, and I told Austin, hey, we're going to have to hold off for a minute. So, I appreciate your patience, Austin, and I appreciate your patience, viewers.
The weather is just crazy in Southern Illinois. At least it's gone from summer to winter to fall to spring, all within like 2 hours of each other. It's been crazy to experience this February weather for sure this year.
It was 71 today when my daughter got off the school bus, so we went around for a little walk. And then when my wife goes to work in the morning, it's scheduled to be 26 degrees.
The old
Makes sense
saying,
of
if
that.
you, yeah, the old saying, if you don't like the weather, wait an
Exactly.
hour. So what's been going on. And like Atlanta basketball, if you don't like the result, just wait the next game and they'll correct it.
Like that
And
segue, Austin. Nicely done.
thank you. Illinois wins 95-85 over the Iowa Hawkeyes in Champaign on Saturday, and it was really the Coleman Hawkins show. 30 points, 5 assists, 5 steals, and just an unbelievable performance. Definitely the Coleman Hawkins game that we all needed to experience after the loss that of Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people agitated with Coleman Hawkins, and a hand raised. If any of you watched that post game that I did after that Penn State game, it wasn't much of a post game. It was 20 minutes of me saying, "What just happened? I don't understand. What just happened?" Me looking, double checking, triple checking the box score to confirm that we had lost that game. And I made a couple comments about Coleman saying, "Hey, you can't be talking all that smack on Twitter and then just not showing up the way you did against Penn State, and you know." Missing those two costly free throws at the end of the game and making that really dumb foul. But it looks like him and Brad had a very intimate conversation in the coach's office, and he's deleted apps on his phone, and he seems to be really focused on what's important now. And yeah, you saw it, 30 points, and I think he only took like 11 shots, right? Let me.
He was 9 for 11 from
Yeah.
the field and then 9 for 11 with his free throws and 3 for 5 from behind the three-point line. Just the efficiency you need to see. And again, I keep saying this line, if Illinois wants to get where Illinois expects to go, Coleman Hawkins is going to have to be a big part of that. And he was the star of the show. Terrence Shannon Jr. only had 12 points. That's 9 points below his season average. And if Coleman didn't have the game that Coleman Hawkins had, Illinois is looking at a 10-6 conference record, and we're thinking, oh, is this a 5 or a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament? What's going on here? At least Illinois kind of course corrected, and Coleman Hawkins was a huge part in that.
Well, I mean, think about it, Austin. Before the game started, if I told you that at the end of the game, Iowa would have 85 points and Domask and Shannon would combine to score 20 between the two, what do you think the final result of that game would have been?
It would have been probably an Iowa 12-point win after the free throw game.
Exactly right. It's one of those where our two best players weren't providing much offensively. And again, that kind of describes this offensive season for the season in general for Illinois basketball for me, because like you have what was probably the most frustrating loss of the season to Penn State just the game before, and then you see the ceiling of this offense the very next game where our two best offensive players barely show up, and the team itself still scores 95 points. How many teams in the country can have their two best players not show up and still put in 95? And dare I say, just almost effortlessly.
Probably only the likes of a Marquette, UConn kind of tier of teams. Other than that, not a lot. Maybe Kentucky after their 115-point output that they had over the weekend, but that list is a very, very short list. I mean, again, Ty Rodgers, 2 points in this game. Like, you're thinking, where did this offense come from? If you just had 12 points from Terrence, 8 points from Marcus Tomaskin, 2 points from Ty Rodgers. Well, you had a good Justin Harmon game. He had 12 points. And then you had a guy by the name of Nico Moretti scoring 9 points to help the cause and 2 for 2 from beyond the 3-point line. I mean, this was a weird game in terms of the flow, in terms of how Brad Underwood coached it. He had almost a line shift if you're talking in hockey terms, in the second half with these guys. So it was a fascinating game to watch, and it was a game that kind of Illinois needed to figure out who to go to when Terrence Shannon's not going.
I mean, I actually want your thoughts on that. What did you think of it? It wasn't like a line shift. It absolutely was like it was a hockey line shift when he basically what was like a minute and a half into the second half. Iowa had scored and gotten rebounds, and basically Underwood, if you hear him tell it, he just had enough. He had seen enough, and he said those 5 butts needed to be on the bench. So he brought in 5 new guys, and it worked. All of a sudden, the 5 guys that the backups that we brought in, were able to kind of change momentum around a little bit. That was a pretty ballsy move on Brad Underwood's part, considering like we were losing at the point. That's kind of a move sometimes you make maybe just to kind of set a tone if you're winning, but we were right in the middle of a battle against one of our rivals, and to have the confidence at that point of the game to make that move, I'm curious what your thoughts were.
I loved it. I mean, this is an Illinois team that's obviously playing for seeding. I think the Big Ten championship is out of reach for the regular season. So this is an opportunity for Brett Underwood to really send messages without too much of a ding on what can happen at the end of the season. So the risk and reward was a perfect situation for Brett Underwood, where the risk was so low. Yes, there would be a loss in there, but the reward was infinitely high with what it could do, and it motivated the starters. The second unit gave a bunch of energy, gave some solid play, and Nico Moretti, I think he kind of carved out a couple more minutes per game here down the stretch with how he handled the ball in certain situations. So I think this was the perfect situation for Brad Underwood. It was almost like he wished it could happen this way, and it did.
Yeah, the Moretti game. It's kind of what we've been hoping for. Him being able to provide on the floor like that kind of opens up so many more possibilities for our offensive team. Like, yeah, I don't think he's going to play. What was it? 17 minutes.
17 minutes, yeah.
Yes, I don't think he's going to play 17 minutes again. But if he can provide maybe 4 or 5 during the game, and then with 2 minutes left, if we're only up 4 or 5 points, if we can just put him just to have a guy who can handle the ball at the end when we know we're going to get pressed, I think that in itself could be really invaluable. And Nico really is one of the good stories in college basketball, as you heard Brad talk about in his press conference. It's just a guy, just a kid who shows up every single practice, does his job, doesn't come to the coach's office to complain about his role, just shows up, supports his teammates, and when his number's called, I mean, he missed his first 2 shots.
Mhm.
When you miss your first 2 shots, credit to 2 people there, to Brad Underwood for not yanking him, because I can see another coach at that point be like, all right, this was a mistake. I'm going to take you back out.
No, he
And
only missed 1 shot. He
oh,
was 2 for
was it his
3.
first shot?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. Okay, sorry, you're right. And credit to Nico for not losing his confidence.
Yep.
Just basically he kind of settled down after that, and he provided much needed, because I mean you can't imagine Iowa scouted much for Nico Moretti.
No,
It's
absolutely not.
so him and the Harmon. Obviously, Harmon sat on the bench for a better part of that first half. Brad was definitely trying to send a message there, and again, it seemed to have worked. Harmon had his best game in a while for us, and we haven't been saying that very much this. Well, I guess we have, but lately we haven't. But every button that Brad Underwood seemed to have pushed against Iowa was the right one.
And Justin Harmon, 6 for 6 from the free throw line. That is a very important stat for Brad Underwood is can you make your free throws, especially after what we saw against Penn State. But a guy that I'm kind of worried about is Luke Goody. He played the lowest amount of minutes of the guys that played. He only 10 minutes, one foul, 3 points. He was 1 for 3 from beyond the 3 point line, only 2 rebounds this game. It feels like he's kind of at a crossroads right now where, yeah, you see what Marcus Domask is doing. You see Amani Hansberry coming in. Um, and there's just not a lot of like solid minutes for him at the moment. If he's not making shots and he's not rebounding, that's not a lot that he can do to help you out on the basketball court at the moment.
I mean, I think you nailed it. If he's not making these wide open threes, then at least Underwood will keep him in if he sees the hustle and grabbing rebounds and giving us second chance points. But I mean, he really got exposed in particular in that Michigan State game where the Spartans made that run and they just continued to attack him down low, and we give up basket after basket. And I think when Brad kind of talked about two of the guys at the end of games who he kind of tried to single out without naming names, I think Goody was one of them that he's just got to figure out another way to contribute to this team because I mean he's absolutely valuable. He's a basketball smart guy. He has seemingly some physical limitations, but he's one of those guys where we just need to every time he catches the ball to shoot without thinking. If the shot goes in, that gives us yet another weapon on offense. If the shot's not going in, then there's guys on the bench that can contribute on the floor moving forward.
You have to go all the way back to January 27th for Luke Goody's last double digit scoring output game. And that's not very, that's not great. He had 5 rebounds against Penn State. He had 0 rebounds against Maryland on February 17th, 0 points, only 9 minutes played there. He needs to figure something out right now. He needs some confidence at the moment. It's just it's sad to see because I think he's still such a talented player, and you don't want a talented player battling like this in this kind of moment. Whenever you kind of need him, he's a junior. He should be able to withstand some of these cold stretches and still maintain that hustle.
And it's a bummer that all this is happening with like 3 games left in the season, 4 games left in the season. You would think that all these guys would have settled into their roles by now. Like we wouldn't have to do a hockey shift in the middle
Yeah.
of a game with 5 games left because Brad was unhappy with the effort of that starting 5. So this team continues to be one that's just so incredibly fun to watch and also so incredibly frustrating to watch. And it's to this day one of those teams where I'm sitting here now. I think it's a team that on its best day can honestly win the national championship. And on its worst day, I can absolutely seeing it go out not just the first weekend, in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, if you battle Akron and you aren't playing tough defense, John Gross's team is going to eat you alive. And that's going to be very embarrassing for an Illini fan as a 4 seed, losing to potentially 13 seed Akron or 12 seed Akron if you're the 5 seed. I mean, there is a gamut of teams that are mid majors that will out hustle Illinois. And you need a Coleman Hawkins game like this with 5 steals and all of that to withstand some of that if you're not getting the scoring output from Terrence Shannon Jr.
It's and then we got Minnesota tomorrow. We got Wisconsin next week. We got Purdue, and then Iowa. So it's like we don't even have that much time to figure it out.
No, there's
You know?
no figuring it out time. If you want to use the Big Ten tournament to figure it out, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to go into that type of environment and try to figure it out whenever these teams are so hungry and they could just pants you, kind of like Indiana did in the Big Ten tournament a couple of years back against Brad Underwood's Illini team. So I just don't think that you can do that because if that confidence is shot going into Selection Sunday, then that's awful. That's awful.
So coming off of Penn State and Iowa, where's your confidence meter in regards to this team?
Um, 10 being national champion, one lose in the first round to a 13 seed or a 12 seed. I am at about a, or yeah, switch those around. So one being national champion, 10 losing in the first round. I'm going to say I am at a 4.5. I still think this is a second weekend team. I think when the lights are going to shine brightest, I think some of that Terrence Shannon, Madison Square Garden energy will turn up like he had against Texas last year. I think that Coleman Hawkins realizes what he's going to be playing for in the NCAA tournament when NBA draft scouts are going to be thick as thieves at these tournament sites. I think that's the reason why that this is a second weekend team. And if you just get enough from Marcus Damask, get enough from Ty Rogers, I think that's enough to win the games that you should win.
I think I agree with you. I actually would probably be even a little higher. I'd put myself at around 3. I still think we should be able to clear that first weekend with the guys that we have on the court, with them being veterans at least. I know we shouldn't be trying to figure out kinks right now with only a handful of games left in the season. Maybe this is just the eternal optimist that I always seem to be when it comes to the Illini, but I still genuinely think, like as you said, when the lights are on, we have not seen the best of Shannon yet. When Damask, we know, is not going to cave under pressure. Hawkins, I think he's waiting for that national moment, which I think can come in the tournament itself. I still think there's at least a second weekend future for this team, but I also understand like this could be an all or nothing type of season. This could very much be a team capable of making it to the Final Four, or there's a team that's going to lose in the first round. And I'm not sure how much of middle I think there is.
Yeah, I mean, this is a put up or shut up kind of NCAA tournament for Brad Underwood. It really is. Like, I'm not saying that he's going to get fired or on any kind of hot seat if he loses in the first round because he's the winningest Big Ten coach in the past 3 to 4 seasons. It's something along
5
those
years,
lines.
yeah, 5 years.
5 years. And, but again, if you lose in the first weekend and you had Io DeSumo, Kofi Coburn, Trent Frazier, Coleman Hawkins, Terrence Shannon Jr., and you don't make it to a Sweet 16 with all of that talent, that's going to be a red flag for some recruits. I know the name of the game is NBA, and if you're going to have Coleman Hawkins and Terrence Shannon repping the orange and blue in the NBA alongside Io DeSumo, then that's going to be great for Brett Underwood. But there's going to start to build a perception, and sometimes perception does become reality, and that's something that Brett Underwood's going to have to address at some point.
And I'm sure he's already addressing it. He's tired of doing it now.
Yeah.
But the voices are just going to get that much louder. Obviously we have some really good talent coming in, but next year, like this team was built to win this year. We have like 5 or 6 seniors who are going to be playing their last game of the season for the orange and blue this year. Obviously, I don't expect Coleman to come back. Next year's team is going to look completely different. And so it's time to it's a put up or shut up season. It's right now we're somewhat lucky that we're hiding in the shadow of Purdue's failures. The fact
Yeah,
that
I
they
mean,
have been higher seeds than us and losing in the first round. But if they make a run in this postseason, which I think they probably will, the spotlight's going to clearly be on Illinois. And we already know how sensitive our fan base is to the reputation that we have. And we tend to take our frustration out on our coach. And so, as you said, I don't think Brad's seat would even be remotely warm, but he's going to have to, be dealing with a lot of bad vibes coming his way.
absolutely. I mean, what do you think of Iowa personally? Like, where do you think they are as a program after McCaffrey left his son? Where do you think they are as a program?
I think Iowa's Iowa. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a diehard Iowa fan. It's because there's whispers now. I don't know if you've heard it about Fran being gone, or meaning them like moving on from Fran. I can't comprehend that. Like with how good they've been the last couple of years with Luke and the Murray brothers and whatnot. Like I would if I'm going to be a bad team, I want to be a fun to watch bad team. Does he have a glaring weakness? And that's it being defense? Yeah, sure. By the way, how funny is that? Like, the University of Iowa, just completely reciprocal basketball and football teams when it comes to offense and defense. But, the Owen Freeman is a really nice young player. I think, he's going to be a thorn on our size. He looks like he's going to be a 4-year college guy. So he's just going to be all conference probably at some point. Big Ten rookie of the year probably this year. I think he's already won the week rookie of the year, or week 9 times this year or something like that. So
Wow.
yeah, he seems to be a shoe in for that. I don't like to say nice things about Iowa, but if I took my blinders off, there's no way I would consider moving on from Fran. I think he finds guys I've never heard of when it comes to the recruiting rankings, and they all of a sudden become contributors to basketball teams. And there's just very few coaches out there where I think Iowa can upgrade from.
I mean, this might sound disparaging to Illini fans, but Fran McCaffrey is essentially Iowa Lou Henson. I mean, he's had some top 4 finishes in the Big Ten. Lou Henson had some weird seasons where he was like 8th in the Big Ten. Um, but the only thing Fran doesn't have that Lou Henson does is a Final Four appearance, and that's kind of what's separating them. I mean, I think they're very similar in talent, and I don't think you ever fire your version of a Lou Henson. You just kind of have to deal with the ceiling that you have, but the floor is just so high year to year. Um, and I just feel like that's what Iowa has right now, and it's frustrating, I bet, for Iowa fans. But hey, maybe one of these years you'll have a Final Four with Fran McCaffrey, just out of a random luck year of the right draw and the right matchups, and that's kind of what you gotta have to deal with if you're an Iowa fan.
Yeah, they were going to need that victory over us to really have a chance for the NCAA tournament this year. So it doesn't look like they'll be making it this year. But again, from what I saw from some of the young guys on that team, Iowa's always tough to play. I'm certainly not looking forward to going to Iowa City last game of the season. And, I hope really nothing is on the line at that point. Unless it's us beating Purdue and us trying to get a share of the title. But I hope at that point we've got a top 4 seed in the tournament secured, because it's a tough place to play, and it's because of them. I think the Sleepers media guys said this best. Like, Iowa is just a little worse version of us right now. Just pure
Yeah,
offense. They can score points in bunches. 85 points to Iowa. Look, I can understand being upset about giving up 90 to Penn State without their best player, or giving up a high amount of points to Michigan State. Giving up 85 to Iowa, they made like 14 straight free throws at the end of the game. I'm not as down on the defense after this game as I was the previous couple, but it is what it is. I'm looking forward to not having to deal with them, particularly, next year. Or no, I guess we have one more. I just talked about we have one more game against them at the end of the year, but they're not a fun team to play. They're just hard to play. But as long as their shots aren't falling in as often as ours are, we should be okay.
I mean, the metrics were pretty similar between the first half and the second half defensively for Illinois, but the second half just felt different. It felt better. It felt more energized as a defensive unit. Iowa just made some tough ass shots uh, in that second half, and that's why I felt better about about the defense. It wasn't just a turnstile like it was the first half.
Mhm.
So I got to give credit to that Iowa offense, just how they played and the shots that they made. But we have a game coming up on February 28th. That would be tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. But before we get into that, Sonny, we have our first sponsor.
Our first sponsor, thank you so
Woo!
much to Riverlands Brewing Company out in St. Charles, Illinois. Hey, beer lovers! Riverlands Brewing Company, your favorite Chicagoland craft beer friends, are throwing a big party for their 5-year anniversary, and they hope you can join them. On Saturday, March 23rd, they're releasing the much anticipated barrel aged anniversary stout, Riverlands 5, and their anniversary triple IPA. For those who cannot make the party, you can find Riverlands beer in the Chicagoland area craft beer stores. See riverlandsbrewing.com for details. Or, for those out of state, you can find limited selections of our beer at tavour.com. That's TAVOUR.com. Once again, visit Riverlands Brewing Company in St. Charles or riverlandsbrewingcompany.com. Thank you so much for
I
sponsoring
I
for the first time.
I hear Riverlands Brewing Company is the brewer by friends for friends. Is that true?
That you're exactly right, Austin. Good call.
I can't wait to try that beer. I will be buying that online and bringing it down to Southern Illinois. I can't wait to try that triple IPA. That sounds absolutely fantastic.
They're good folks. I got to strike up conversation with them a couple weeks back and introduce them to the podcast, and they're big fans of the show. So much so that they're helping us out here. So again, much appreciated.
Cheers! But this will have a Riverlands Brewing Company beer in it
Soon.
soon. Yes. But we do have that game tomorrow between Minnesota and Illinois. It's in Champaign, and the first 750 fans or so are getting a free scarf, which I really want that scarf. I'm pretty jealous that I can't make it up to Champaign. But Illinois is 11.5 point favorites. What are your initial thoughts on this game, Sonny?
I think 11 and a half points is ridiculous. The way we're playing defense right now, I can't comprehend the idea of giving anyone double digit points to start the game off with. It's a game we should win, and we should win decisively, but I have a lot of respect for Ben Johnson. I think he's one of the best up and coming coaches in the country. So if there's someone who can come up with some sort of offensive scheme against our lackluster defense, it's him. And so I'm not, chalking this game up as a victory by any stretch.
I mean, if you look at a similar team as Illinois, they lost 90-85 to Iowa on February 11th. So I think that's going to be a similar story as this game. As I think Illinois will win, but I mean, the scoring output will be there for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I think Dawson Garcia is a little bit of a matchup nightmare for Illinois. If Coleman Hawkins is not guarding him, I don't trust Quincy Guerrier to handle that responsibility for those rare occasions that Coleman's not on him. So I think this is going to be a situation where Minnesota's going to score a lot of points. They average 47% from the field this year. I mean, I think, and 75 points a game. This is going to be a much closer game than anybody is anticipating, especially Vegas. So I'd hammer that plus 11.5. And going back to Ben Johnson, if it wasn't for Chris Collins, he'd be your Big Ten Coach of the Year with how he's performing. And that team was anticipated to be like what Michigan is, 3-14. They are 8-8 in conference play this year. I mean, outstanding job, Ben Johnson. Outstanding job, Minnesota Golden Gophers. They've propelled the rebuild of that program in a way that I did not anticipate.
Yeah, they're just, they're going to continue to get better. They're a team that I think next year will make a solid run to make the NCAA tournaments. They have a chance this year. They're going to have to knock us off, which I obviously hope doesn't happen. But I think they got 2 quad one games left in their schedule, and so here's hoping that they aren't able to pull it off. Especially, I think they just had a bad loss to, who did they just lose to?
I think their loss that will haunt them is Missouri. They lost 70-68 to a team that's
Yikes.
0-14
That's a
in
bad
SEC
Missouri
play.
team.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bad.
They have Penn State, Indiana, and Northwestern to round out the year. So they have an opportunity against Northwestern, and then Indiana. They are just Indiana's whatever Indiana wants to be that particular night. So best of luck figuring them out.
I mean, like you said, I will take the overs on all of Dawson Garcia's statistics. I mean, he's basically Coleman Hawkins light, and but we know we just have not been able to defend that type of player. But unfortunately for Minnesota, is they're a good offensive team and an okay defensive team. But the problem is that we are an excellent offensive team and an okay defensive team. So, what they are, we're just actually a lot better at. And so I do think we should come out with a victory on our end. 11.5 points is just too much.
Yeah, you just got to take care of Cam Christie and Mike Mitchell Jr. Those two guys are the only double-digit scorers alongside of Dawson Garcia. And the onus is going to be on guys like Marcus Domask and Ty Rogers to lock down defensively from the get-go, or else there might be another line shift in Brad Underwood's future as well in the second half. So I think the most surprising stat that I saw was the over under was 155.5. I'm hammering that over in this game.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems a little low. I didn't even look at that number, but yeah, count me in.
I just feel like this Illinois team, like at some point, it's a pride issue, right? In terms of defense, like you would think they would showcase guys. I'm tired of getting blasted in practice. I'm tired of getting asked about it by the media in the locker room. Why we struggle with defense constantly. Like at some point, pride has to show up. These are not slow athletes either. These are not guys that are just so slow that they can't keep up. When you have a guy with the athleticism of Terrence Shannon Jr., Ty Rogers, what he can do, and Quincy Guerrier, there is no reason why this team should struggle the way they do defensively. You just got to man up and showcase that this guy in front of me, he's not beating me. He is not getting to the bucket. I'm going to get a hand in his face. If he makes a long 3-point shot, okay, cool. But he's not going to do that again. He's not going to do that consistently. He'll get his one great shot, but come on, don't be a turnstile. Like, pride has to be a factor here for this Illini basketball team.
I want to agree with you, but again, why is pride a factor now with 4 games left? I think pride should have been a factor way earlier. We're one of the best defensive teams in the league coming into January, and then we just kind of had a monster fall off as soon as Shannon, had to, miss a couple of games. But even upon his return, we just never reverted back to the team that we were in 2023. And now I just question everything. Like you said, a college basketball team that has Coleman Hawkins on it, Ty Rogers on it, and Terrence Shannon Jr. on it, all 3 individual, very, very good defensive players, should not be as bad at defense as they are currently right now. And I, for one, I can't figure it out. Actually, I'm curious, did you pay attention to the back and forth dialogue yesterday that was going on between friend of the show, Stephen Bardo, and I believe Raphael Davis?
Yes, it was about like the best defenders in the league or that all defensive first team. And Stephen Bardo said Coleman Hawkins should be on there, and somebody else said Ace Baldwin Jr. should be on there. And right now, I would not give anybody on this Illini basketball team any first team all defensive honors. Like,
Wow.
I don't care how individually great Coleman is. Like, if he's so individually great, there would be differences in the scoring that Illinois has given up in games that he's played in.
I mean, I can't say I agree with you at all there. I think, what Terrence is able, or sorry, the Coleman is able to do is just, his versatility in guarding 1 through 4 is just so valuable to a college basketball team. And yeah, we're having problem with our schemes on defense. I think it might just be a coaching issue. But for me, I think a first team for Coleman at least is almost a no-brainer. We have a couple other guys who have the talent level to be all conference Big Ten defense, but I agree with you there that we shouldn't reward more than one guy, but I don't think you can pin all of this kind of on Coleman. I've heard some publications talk about him being mentioned, and Stephen Bardo mentioned him for Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. So we're not even talking about first team, just because of the versatility and how he changes the game on the floor at that end. But interesting that you don't agree with that at all.
I kind of want to go back and look at the star performer of the opponents and see who Coleman guarded, just to kind of see where Coleman had those guys. Like, I just feel like that would be a strong indication, because if he truly can guard 1 through 5, why isn't he just on the best player all the time? Like, I feel like
But I
that
mean,
would
like
be
we switch a lot. Like that's the problem. That's where I talk about it being our scheme. Like a
right.
lot of the times we just switch. So, that's what happened against Michigan State, where they knew just give it to the guy that put your best scorer on, make Goody guard your best scorer, and they just kept getting layups. So that's why that stat in particular would be a little tricky to find, because it's not just, oh, their starting center scored this many points. We'd have to really at least confirm that it was Coleman that was guarding the guy. So, from what I've seen, like, and it's not just highlights, but, Boo Buie basically switching on to Coleman Hawkins. Now, Boo Buie is going to take 99% of the centers straight to the rim and score an easy layup on him. And he just couldn't dance around Coleman. Coleman had him, forced him back out to the 3-point line. It's that sort of defensive just versatility that I really appreciate about Coleman. And, it's like we don't need his 30-point games every day. But as long as he provides that on the defensive end, I think, it raises this floor of our team.
That is a good point. Let's end this episode with a score Illini basketball game.
It's got to be high scoring. I'm going to say 92-86 Illini.
Yeah, I think that Illinois wins by 6 points as well. Where it's all going to come down to, can Illinois get a couple defensive stops? And I think they ultimately will. And Illinois sneaks out of this with the victory.
All right, Austin, anything else?
I think that is it. We will talk about this game tomorrow, and we'll see what defense that Illinois comes with. Sonny, thank you as always. And this has been the Illini Cast, part of the Big Banter Podcast Network, and now sponsored by Riverlands Brewing Company. Thank you, Sonny.